Welcome to Hide and Seek TV. It's your boy Hide and Seek. I'm back again with another video. I'm about to delve into NBA Youngboy right quick. I'm be covering a lot of themes in here. This is probably gonna be like a kind of like a part one in a way. I'll probably do another one following up down the line or soon, however the spirit may lead. But I'm gonna delve into this whole thing because when you understand the Youngboy, it all goes into the blasphemy. A lot of the rappers go into Boy and Little, all of those names because like Lil Wayne, Lil Durk, Lil Yachty, you know what I mean, Young Boy, even 50 Cent, you say it's the kid, man, it's the kid. It all go into that because remember as it's written how the Son of God, the man child, you know what I'm saying, the man child, the little boy, the little child should lead them. He's the Son of God. So they all go into that name of blasphemy when they take on that boy, little, and, kid name, So I'm going to delve into this right quick because when you understand the whole thing, why Donald Trump had to be involved, because in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 52, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So the dead goes into those who were once ignorant and sleep. Remember, as it's written, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So Youngboy had to be out in the mountains out in Utah because it goes into that whole theme of dealing with the jazz, the trumpet, because in Joel 2:1, as it's written, blow ye the trumpet in Zion and sound a holy alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord coming, for it is nigh. So that's why he had to come out of he had to go through Utah being on house arrest, because that house arrest is super symbolic because it all goes into the Lord dwelling within his king's chamber, within the house of the Lord, within his temple blasphemy. Remember, he's the young boy, the one that shall lead them to blasphemy. So remember when they said he was young. Remember they say he got that scar on his face because remember they say he broke his neck while he was wrestling as a little boy. So that whole thing with that wrestling, which is very serious. I'm gonna delve into all of that. That wrestling is very serious because it goes to how Christ. Remember when Christ was walking the earth the first time? Remember he would cast demons out of people. Remember he would wrestle out demons out of people, doing exorcism, healing people from sicknesses and from demons that troubled him. So he go into the great wrestler. That's why excuse the whitewashing, but that's why WWE, they love to do that, men running around in tights, in underwear, wrestling each other, because when Christ was crucified, remember he was crucified in his underwear by the Romans. So that's why they had to say the young boy had to get that scar, because they already know he was the young boy. They was gonna build him up as the one that leads the young Hebrews into chaos. Because when you understand that, they had to get that scar on his face. Remember, as it's written, by the stripes we were healed. Remember when Christ was crucified, they striped him, they struck him. You know what I'm saying? With the whole thing with the strap hitting him on his back. So, by his stripes we were healed. So that's why they got to have, he got the scar. Remember when he returned from the dead, remember he had his scar. So that's why Youngboy got the scar on his face. That's why Tony Montana, Al Pacino, remember had to be Scarface dealing with cocaine, dealing with bricks. Because as it's written in Revelation 3:12, those who overcome will I make a pillar, will I make a stone in my Father's temple. So, that go into those bricks, blasphemy, the Scarface, the Messiah symbology. It's very important to know what's going on with all of this blasphemy, man. So let's delve even deeper into this, because when you understand what music is, music is the highest form of praise. It's the highest language. So that's why the devil's infiltrated. They want to use it to cause chaos. Youngboy, the whole thing, his whole character and persona that they push through him, is I don't care if I die today. I don't care if I die. I don't care about dying. You know what I'm saying? Because they want to push that spirit on people. They want people to die in ignorance so that they can go on that path of destruction, going to the lake of fire. That's his whole persona and whole thing that he pushes. nothing but chaos, nothing but that kind of like that Nirvana spirit from the 80s. You know, the Nirvana, you know, we die. You know, Kurt Cobain blow his brains out with his shotgun, you know. So it's very important to know what they're doing. So let's delve into this music aspect. I'm going to play a scene from a film and I'm going to dive on in. You know, Lucifer is the chief of music. So, you know, he uses music to cause disruption in people's lives. You know, music controls metabolism. It controls behavior. It controls the soul. So the devil, you know, he uses music on earth in reverse of what it's supposed to do in healing. He wanted to cause, you know, chaos within a person's soul and lead them to do things they normally wouldn't do. You know what I'm saying? It's very important to know why, you know, we got to know what we ingest. So, you know, I'm going to play a quick scene from that movie Sinners right quick. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit. But just pay attention to this. I'm going to kind of skip through it and everything. But it's important to know what that music does to a person's mind and soul. You know, and what realm it can take you into, you know. So.
What we do is sacred and big.
See, this is what we do. It's sacred and it's big, you know. So the magic, that mean nothing but that enchanting spirit, that witchcraft. So look, this is just generations of generations that the devil been corrupting souls. See the 1970 theme, you know.
Somebody take me in your arms tonight. Oh. Somebody take me.
Now you see that hip hop, you see how it goes into that hip hop, because the hip hop is not really built on how can you say, it's not really built, you know, like where it has its own sound. You know, hip hop samples everything, so it's like limitless. Because when you understand hip hop, you know, it's very rap is very satanic, because, you know, as it's written, you know that you remember Joseph was embalmed, Jacob was embalmed, you know what I'm saying? So when you understand that embalming, it goes into that rapping to prepare to go inside your tomb, you know. So as it's written in 1 John 4:3, you know, those who deny Christ come in flesh are antichrist. You know, he's King of kings, Lord of lords. So, you know, he's walking the earth this time as he was the first time. You know, as I've been showing through videos and explaining what's really going on. And I'm going to get into all of that with the altars and stuff later on in the video. But they don't want people knowing about the king's chamber of the altars, and how when the Exodus fulfills, he'll be placed in his king's chamber in the tomb, you know, once everything fulfills. You know, as time really progresses and as human life is fulfilled. So you see how everything comes together. They don't want people knowing any of these things. You kind of see what I mean? And that's what that rapping is. That rapping goes into nothing but that embalming. So it deals with, that's why it's all filled up with that death. I don't care about dying. I'll kill you. I'll shoot you. I'll beat you to death. You know, it's all chaotic because it all goes into that death energy. It's like that is strong and death. Same with country music. That's why, like, I think 40-something%, something like that. The percentage is high, though, that a lot of people who listen to country music, you know, they do a lot of self-harm and they no longer with us, you know. Just for censorship, I'll speak it that way. So you see a lot of that, it all goes to that death energy, because that country goes into that whole theme of, you know, wanting to, you know, having that pride of America, having that pride, you know, that this is our land. You know, we'll do whatever, we are willing to die for what we believe in. Give me liberty or give me death, you know, type of spirit. So that's what they push on real people. And real people don't have that in their hearts, but they get programmed by the music, you know. So. See how the music is just nothing but chaos for generations. See what I'm saying? See that? Casting out the spells, you know? See, now look, I'm gonna get right to the point. So look. Hold on, I should load up in a second.
Love you. Will somebody take me in your eyes?
See, now he throw up the 666, you see? Throw up the devil horns. And then look, they don't even know what they in. I mean, they know in the spirit realm, this is what's really going on, you know? They all in hell. They want to rebel and do what thou wilt. You see what I'm saying? It's all that hell frequency, you know, that people are dealing with, death energy. They want to destroy your soul. So you see, that's why he got the Make America, I think it was the Make America slime again, because they already know what's going on. So in Genesis 11, verse 3, and they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slime had they for mortar. So, you know, it goes to how during the time of the Babel Tower, during the time of Nimrod, remember when they had the first one world order, the one world language, one world order with Nimrod, you know, who was trying to build the Tower to Heaven. You know, they were using slime to hold the bricks together. So, you know, that's why Drake had that I'm going to slime you out and all of that, because what they want to do is they want to cover people in that slime, put people back in that Babylonian spirit. And that's what they use a Youngboy for, you know. And notice even like his posture, you know what I mean? How his hands are like, how it's symbolic. Notice how his hands and like cuffs in the symbology. They want people trapped. They want people stuck in the matrix. You see how everybody in their suits and they all got their ski mask on with green ski masks, because they already know the Masons, what they are doing right now, they trying to gather up as many souls as possible. You know, we are many, you are but one, is what they saying to the saints. You know what I'm saying? You know, so you see that's why Youngboy had to have a Kyrie as the godmother too, because, you know, Kyrie just means Yah, Yahweh. So, you know, and that's why, you know, she's Ephraimite, so, you know, so-called Hispanic. You know, I got to have the two sticks together, Judah and Ephraim, you know, of Israel, you know. And that's why you got to have that Mayweather connection, because when you understand that Mayweather is serious, that go right into that eye of the storm, the all-seeing eye, the Mayweather, you know, the Illuminati, 1776, May 1st, you know. That's why you gotta have that Mayweather connection. You know, you're not gonna be around no Floyd Mayweather, you know what I mean, without some kind of ties, man. That's high level Mason. So, you know, you gotta have connections to get to Mayweather. You know, that's why you see he always go through the prison, because, you know, it's all blasphemy. Isaiah 53, but he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes were we healed. So that go back to that head scar. You see? And then also, it's very important to know what's going on, because, you know, as it's written, you know, it's very important to know how he'll go through the prison. So verse 8, he was taken from prison and from judgment. Who shall declare his generation? You see, he was taken out of the prison. That's why rappers go through that prison ritual, you know. So, you know, when you translate praise the Lord, it becomes Louis Eternal. You know, hallelujah. Holly means to praise, Louis Eternal Yah. So, you know, obviously that's why they all wear that Louis Vuitton blasphemy. They blaspheme the name. You know, as it's written in Isaiah 52, 5-6, that through the blasphemy, the name will be revealed. So, you know, obviously he got his Louis V. Louis on my Louis V on my jacket. You see, they all gotta have that Louis V talk. You know, so it's all connected. And notice around the time too of him getting out of jail, you got Shavante Gilgeous-Alexander in the Thunder. You know, who played for the Thunder in the finals. So, you know, you got a lot of divine symbology. I'm going to get into that in a minute. Remember, you just had Joey Bad. Remember, he was rapping against Ray Vaughn. He was rapping against Daylight, the battle rapper Daylight, whose name is Vaughn as well. And then, you know, Joey is Vaughn. All of that Von symbology around the time of NBA Youngboy getting out. I'm gonna explain it in a minute. But obviously he come out of Louisiana. So when you understand that Louisiana, like I just explained about the Louis Eternal, that's why in Deuteronomy 28:68 it talked about how Judah was gonna go through slave ships and come into America, come into spiritual Egypt again. And that's why the boats went through Louisiana, because as it's written in Nehemiah 1:9, but if ye turn unto me and keep my commandments and do them, though there whereof you cast out unto the uttermost part of the heaven, yet I will gather them from thence, will bring them into the place I have chosen to set my name. That's why he had to rise out of Louisiana, the Louisiana. It's very important stuff, That's why this year, the same year, the Super Bowl had to be in Louisiana, and it deals with the Saints, you know what I mean? It's all symbolic. You remember the Eagles had to play the Chiefs because, the Chiefs just go into the how the Lord would say he would make chiefs and priests. So that just goes into the chiefs, the children of Israel, the Judahites, the kingdom of Judah, coming into their ranking as chiefs and kings. And then, the Eagles, because it's written, we mount up with wings and be renewed in our strength, preparing for the Exodus. So that's why you see you had to have, obviously NBA Youngboy, Fredo Bang, and, and the real G Money. You remember the G Money had to be the sacrifice because they go into that Masonic G. He had to be the one to go because they go right into that G, that Masonic sacrifice, so that NBA Youngboy could rise. It's all symbolic how these Masons work. Like I said, Youngboy just represents nothing but the whole thing that the young child, the man child, Christ shall lead them. And, obviously he overcomes the Masons, the G's. So that's why they had to have that set up through their Freemasonry rituals, so that Youngboy can rise up, That's why he had that song, I Ain't Going Outside Today, because outside today, that all goes to the whole thing of, like I said, dwelling in the house of the Lord forever, So it's very important too, the whole situation, the reason why I brought up the Von thing, because remember Von was connected to Lil Durk, the voice, and it's all symbolic. That's why I brought that up. You remember I was showing that Shavon Gilgeous Alexander, Shavonte Gilgeous Alexander, played for the Thunder. Remember, as it's written, the Lord's voice is as a thunder. And then that's why Lil Durk, he go by the voice. And then you remember he had the Von. Von is just a derivative. It all go into John. Like, the John the Baptist symbology. So you have that connected with the voice, because they go into the voice in the wilderness, uplifting the Messiah. So that's why he had to battle against Youngboy, because like I said, they go right into the man child shall lead them. And then that's the Louisiana, the Louis Eternal symbology. So it's all connected. That's why Von and Durk had to battle against Youngboy, over a woman. Durk had to battle against Youngboy over a woman. My bad, Von. My bad, y'all. Von had to battle against Youngboy over a woman. It all goes into that, the bride of heaven. You know what I mean? The kingdom of heaven is as a bride. It's just all Masonic rituals, how they operate. And people think it's real. Like, it's real, but it's symbolic. You know what I mean? It's all just ritualistic blasphemy. So that's why, the Von had to be the one that died off, because, it goes into the whole theme, of how we die daily in Christ. You know what I'm saying? All of the symbology. Remember, John the Baptist was beheaded, then before Yahushua was crucified. It's all just the same thing of how they work, And that's why they had to do all of that symbology. Notice Youngboy was in his house on house arrest, and then King Von had to die by the car. Because when you understand, the car is super symbolic, because the word Christ is the Greek derivative of karos, the karos. Ka means soul, Ra means light, the kara. So it just means the anointed one. So like I said again, so basically notice Youngboy had to go through house arrest because the Lord must dwell in his house forever, the man child. And then Von had to die by the car, trying to fight Quando Rondo. It's all symbolic, all connected. And that's why through it all, Youngboy had to be pardoned by Trump, because they go into the trumpet, sounding that trumpet in the holy mountain. That's why he was in Utah, getting released from house arrest, preparing to go do his tour. Because as it's written, I'm going to explain this. In Isaiah 19, in that day there should be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord, and it should be for a sign and for witness unto the Lord of hosts, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. So the top of the altar is measured at 76 degrees, foreshadowing the kingdom to come. So, obviously Youngboy is called, 38, baby. 38 is half of 76. That's why when Kobe was wearing number 8, remember he had the 3-peat with Shaq. He had to win 3 titles with Shaq in a row. It all goes into that, the 3/8, the 38, baby, the 76, So it's all connected stuff, man. That's why him and Quando Rondo had to be connected. That's why Youngboy had to be connected to Quando Rondo, the Crip. And then, he goes inside a house arrest, and then Quando Rondo, the Crip, because the Crip is just the chamber, the altar, the king's chamber, dwelling in the house of the Lord forever. That's why Von had to fight Quando Rondo by the car, because it all go into that car going inside that Crip, that chamber. That's what that Crip walking blasphemy all about. I can go to that in this right quick. But it's all just symbolic, Let's delve deep into this. There's no way around none of this at all. Look at this. It's all in our faces. See, I'm full of the blues that go right back to that Crip. That blue just going to Law and Order, the color of Judah, the Holy Kingdom of Judah. See that the Crip walking, and they playing that horn sound, the whistling, Many shall gather unto him. The Son of God rises. The kingdom of heaven rises like the sun in the west. That's why they do the Crip walking in the west. So that's why that whole thing they use the NBA Youngboy like for what they like to do, the YN talk, because they want to keep people in that false identity and be chaotic. Don't declare their true identity as Judahites. That's why he had to go Louisiana versus Chicago, because Chicago, Shy, it just goes into nothing but Christ, the Shy. So, it all goes into the Chi, the Shy, So X and P together just goes into Christ. The XP together goes into the Christ. Christ and the bride. The kingdom of heaven is as a bride. The X and the P. That's why, right through all of that, Joe Biden had to rise into power through Georgia. Remember Vaughn had to die off at the hookah lounge in Georgia for Joe Biden to win Georgia. Remember, once he won Georgia, he won election in 2020, Because it all goes to that Joseph. It go right back to how Joseph, remember, he became the overseer of Egypt. And you see the altars are in the midst of the land of Egypt, and the Exodus will be led back to the holy altars of the Lord. It's all connected. That's why they call him the Michael Jackson of the days, the days generation, Youngboy. Because in Daniel 12, 1-2, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which shall stand up for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as there was a nation even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So that's why they pushing the Youngboy. Everybody, I got to go to this concert. This tour about to be lit, because that's all blasphemy of how Christ is getting ready to, rise up, gather up his people, and prepare to go back to the altars. That's why he coming out of house arrest. It's all symbolic. I'm going to show y'all this right quick. The boule. So y'all can understand it on a deeper level too. It go right into the Babylonian lion. The Babylonian lion, Lucifer, wanting to keep the Messiah inside that jar, that mason jar, keep him hidden. You see, you got that will inside of there, because that will within the will just goes into Christ in Ezekiel 1:16 being revealed. The will of I am that I am, the William, the will within the will. So it's all just connected stuff, you know. You know, he's the never broke again, because that never broke again goes to also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward they shall come out with a great abundance. You know, never broke again. The altars get all the gold. Instead of it being on rappers' necks, on chains and around his teeth, you know, and grills, you know. So you see, that's why you see Youngboy did the AI Youngboy, because that AI, remember you got Allen Iverson, you know, who was a 76er. So it's all connected stuff. And then you remember AI, you know, his birthday, he's born on June 7th. That's 6-7. That's right with the 7-6, the 6-7-7-6. You know? So all that stuff just goes to number how these devils blaspheme, and they give people all of this and they fall for it every time. They full of the blues, you know? I know the truth hurts, so I lied to you. Like, that's what they want to do. They want to keep, you know, music. One thing about music, when it hit, you don't feel no pain. That's what they tell you, but it's destroying your soul, you know. It pleases the flesh, but destroys the soul. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to end that right here. I'll put my King Von and Lil Durk, all that stuff, breakdowns in the comment section below. But thank you for watching Hide and Seek TV. Much more is coming, man. Peace.